how her friend pulled her into the world of infidelity, and I could no longer stay silent. Jake sat at the edge of the bed, holding his phone. On the screen was a video he had stumbled upon while browsing Amy's old laptop for their photos. Instead of a family montage, the screen revealed his wife, Amy, and her friend Kate at a party, sipping wine and laughing. It seemed ordinary, until the scene shifted. Kate leaned in, whispering something into Amy's ear. "You like this, don't you?" Kate murmured. Jake's heart sank. His world was falling apart. Kate stroked Amy's shoulder, then gently leaned in, her lips brushing Amy's neck. The video played on, revealing more unsettling details. A man approached Kate, flirting openly. To Jake's horror, Amy didn't brush him off. Instead, she smiled coyly, hiding behind Kate as if seeking protection. But her eyes betrayed something else, desire. Desire Jake had never seen before. The phone trembled in Jake's hands. He couldn't watch, but he couldn't look away. How had it come to this? Why had Amy changed so much? His phone rang. It was Amy. Her name flashing on the screen felt like a cruel twist of fate. Jake answered hesitantly. "Hi." Amy's voice was calm, warm. "Hi. How's your day?" Jake asked, struggling to mask his unease. "Oh, it's been great. I'm just out with Kate. You know, girl talk." She laughed. But to Jake, the laughter sounded forced. "Why didn't you tell me about these parties you've been going to? With strangers?" Jake's voice carried an edge he couldn't hide. "Oh, it's nothing serious. Just interesting people, fun conversations. Maybe you'll join us next time?" Her response came with a carefree laugh. Jake paused, realizing something was amiss. He already knew there was something between them, a shift he couldn't ignore. Was she cheating on him? Or was his mind playing tricks? The video didn't lie, though. Amy kept talking, as if everything was normal. Yet Jake could sense the faintest tension in her tone. It was subtle, but it was there. "By the way, Jake, you wouldn't mind if I took a little getaway with Kate next week? Just a quick trip to a hotel outside the city," she added casually, her words almost too normal. But what followed shattered him. "Oh, and maybe a few interesting guys will join us," she added unexpectedly. Jake couldn't believe his ears. He froze, his heart racing. His vision of Amy and their relationship crumbled. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice quiet but carrying immense weight. "I'm just joking, honey," she laughed again. But Jake knew it wasn't a joke. "Are you?" he repeated, his voice more a mix of doubt and pain than curiosity. "Yes, I'm serious," she said through laughter, but it wasn't the warmth he once knew. She had changed, and Jake knew it. Jake felt like everything he once knew and loved was breaking apart. Yet he didn't know what to do. He was torn between wanting the truth and fearing it. The next day, Jake came home early, hoping for a calm evening with his wife. But the unease from the video and their strange conversation lingered. Something inside told him they were drifting apart. Walking into the kitchen, he saw Amy and Kate chatting at the table. They were laughing, but something felt off. Their voices hushed as Jake approached, their gazes briefly meeting his. In their eyes, he saw something unusual, something he didn't want to see. It wasn't just a friendly conversation. There was something deeper, something hidden. "Hey, how's it going?" Jake asked, trying to sound casual though unease tightened his chest. "Oh, hey," Amy responded with a smile, but it felt forced. Kate nodded in acknowledgement, remaining silent. Both women appeared too composed, raising Jake's suspicions. "What were you two talking about?" he asked, attempting to feign indifference. Yet his tone betrayed the same unease he had felt on the phone the day before. "Nothing special, just girl talk," Amy replied, but her gaze shifted aside, and Jake noticed how her hand subtly clenched the cup she was holding. Kate nodded, but added nothing. Both women looked as if they were trying to hide a secret, and Jake caught on. Amy quickly got up and turned to Kate. "We should probably move to another room. We need some privacy, right?" she said, her voice tense. "Sure. We'll be back soon," Kate replied, nodding. The two women hastily left the kitchen, clearly not intending to return anytime soon. Jake was left alone, unsure of what to do. He hated being ignored, or when such a palpable distance arose between him and Amy. But now, It felt even worse. Something about their behavior made him uneasy. His gut told him they were hiding something. What exactly, he couldn't say, but deep down, he knew it was significant. Jake decided to give them some space, but couldn't resist the urge to find out what they were discussing. He quietly left the kitchen, just in time to hear the door to another room close. Approaching cautiously, he overheard their muffled voices. "Are you sure he won't find out?" Kate's voice carried through the door. "I don't know, but we can't stop now. It's gone too far," Amy replied, her voice uncertain. "You don't understand how much he's changed lately. He started asking questions." "What do you mean?" Kate asked. "Maybe he's already suspicious," Amy admitted, her voice shaky. "I don't know what to do. You can't just stop now. You know he wants everything to stay as it is. But you don't want all of this to be for nothing, do you?" Kate's voice grew more determined, almost commanding. "I'm scared that if he finds out, it will all fall apart," Amy said, a mix of anxiety and confusion in her voice. These words were a verdict for Jake. He stood outside the door, unable to believe what he was hearing. They were hiding something big and important. His heart raced as terrible possibilities filled his mind. He turned and quietly left the house, careful not to alert them. Outside, he tried to clear his head, taking deep breaths of fresh air, but his thoughts wouldn't let go. What did those words mean? What were they doing behind his back? And most importantly, why didn't he already know the truth? These questions tormented him, and the suspicion that Amy was betraying him wouldn't leave. He realized he might need to confront her directly, but the idea of looking her in the eye now seemed unbearable. When Jake returned home, he felt shattered. He wanted to believe in Amy, to trust her, but the growing unease gnawed at him. He thought about everything he had done for their relationship, plans, trips, countless small and grand gestures, even the new car he had gifted her for her birthday. All these memories came flooding back, and it was hard for him to accept that all of it could have been for nothing. Amy had changed so much since meeting Kate. Jake stood in the hallway, gathering his thoughts. He had made a decision. It was time to talk to Kate. It was the only way to find out if his suspicions were justified, or if it was all in his head. Kate was already in the living room. She sat on the couch, flipping through a magazine, as if nothing was wrong. She looked calm, even cheerful, but Jake could sense something off. "Hi, Kate," he said, trying to keep his tone neutral. "Hi, Jake," she replied with a faint smile. "How are you?" "Fine," Jake said, though his words didn't reflect how he truly felt. "Anything new?" Kate shifted her gaze from the magazine to him and laughed. "Oh, nothing much. Just thinking about how we might take a trip next week. Maybe a small getaway to a hotel outside the city? It would be a great little break. What do you think?" For a moment, Jake considered her suggestion. The idea of going somewhere with Kate might have seemed normal under different circumstances, but with so much doubt weighing on him, it felt far from it. Still, he decided to keep his emotions in check. "Why not?" he said, trying not to appear suspicious. "Sounds good." Kate thanked him and added, "We won't let you down, Jake. It'll be the perfect getaway, and we'll have a wonderful time." But after that conversation, Jake realized one thing. He needed to remain vigilant. Everything seemed too carefree, as if someone wanted him to believe the world around him was normal. The signs were everywhere. Amy avoiding him more frequently, her growing closeness to Kate. All of it raised more questions than answers. Later, Amy walked into the room and started talking to Jake, unaware that he had already drawn his own conclusions. She asked if Kate could stay with him for a few days. Jake couldn't help but notice how her eyes lit up when she mentioned it. "Jake, I was thinking it might be nice for Kate to stay with us for a few days. We could spend time together, share some thoughts, and relax," Amy said, nervously glancing at her husband. Her tone fluctuated, but Jake wasn't naive. He noticed everything. "Sure," Jake replied, though his tone lacked sincerity. It felt like every word she said was laced with ulterior motives, and her behavior unsettled him. He couldn't put his finger on what exactly was wrong, but his suspicions only grew. He also understood that he couldn't just accuse Amy without evidence. He tried not to show his doubts. Amy was a crucial part of his life, but their relationship had started to feel different lately. Kate ended up staying with them for several days, and Jake tried to maintain composure. They had dinners together, laughed, and spent time as a group, but Jake increasingly felt the distance growing between him and Amy. She seemed more withdrawn, and her behavior struck him as increasingly odd. One evening, Jake entered their bedroom, where he and Amy used to sleep. Amy wasn't there, but Kate was sitting on the bed as if waiting for someone. This only deepened his concern. "What are you doing here?" Jake asked. "Just waiting for Amy to come back," Kate replied, her expression calm, too calm for Jake not to notice. He took a deep breath, trying to collect his thoughts. He couldn't stay silent any longer. He needed to know the truth, and he decided it was time for an open conversation with Amy. No matter what she said, Jake felt that a significant part of their past was already lost. That night, Jake sat in the living room, bracing himself for what might be the harshest truth he had ever faced. Amy returned home from work and immediately noticed Jake and Kate in the bedroom. Her tone was calm, almost too casual. "What are you doing here?" Amy asked, looking from Jake to Kate. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed tension, a subtle delay in masking her emotions. Jake felt a chill run through him. Could Amy truly not see his suspicions? Or was she so bold that she didn't perceive her behavior as unusual? Amy glanced at Jake and, without hesitation, said, "I'll be sleeping separately tonight. I want to sleep with Kate. We need some time alone together." Jake felt his chest tighten, his heart vibrating with an incomprehensible pain. Those words carried more weight than any suspicion. It felt as though there was now an insurmountable chasm between him and Amy. "Why?" Jake asked, striving to keep his voice calm, though he was inwardly shattered. "I've just been feeling a bit distant lately. I need some space, some time to recharge. Kate is my best friend. It's comfortable with her," Amy explained, stepping closer to Jake and hugging him. It wasn't a typical hug. It felt like she was trying to reassure him. And though he didn't fully understand why she was acting this way, Jake felt a fleeting moment of relief. "All right," he said, unable to find better words. He didn't want to come across as overly emotional, even though his heart felt heavy. That night, Jake lay in bed, trying to calm his thoughts. He wanted to believe that it was all in his head, that he simply lacked quality time with Amy. He tried to convince himself of this, closed his eyes, and attempted to fall asleep. But the night was restless. Hours later, Jake woke up to strange sounds coming from the other room. It was unusual, as he hadn't heard anything like it in years. It sounded like Amy and Kate were talking, laughing, and then shouting. Not fear, but sounds of pleasure. Jake, confused and worried, got out of bed, quietly walked down the hallway, and approached their room, making sure not to make a sound. As he neared the door, the noises stopped abruptly. He knocked lightly. "Are you there? Is everything all right?" Jake asked, unable to hide the concern in his voice. There was silence in the room for a moment before Amy opened the door. Her expression was calm, but her lips were tense. "Yes, everything's fine. Just a bad dream. Kate was telling me something, and it startled me. But it's nothing serious," Amy said with a smile that seemed too perfect, as if nothing had happened. Jake didn't fully believe her. Those weren't sounds of nightmares. They were too vivid, even for the dead of night. If it were a real nightmare, Amy wouldn't have regained composure so quickly. He didn't press further, choosing to believe that maybe his mind was playing tricks on him. But he couldn't shake the feeling that the whole truth was being kept from him. The next morning, Jake couldn't help but confront both Kate and Amy about what had happened the night before. "What was that about?" he asked, trying to keep his tone calm, though his voice was subconsciously more tense than he intended. Kate raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" she asked, sitting at the table and sipping her coffee. "It was just a nightmare, Jake." Jake couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Amy's calm voice, though steady, carried an undertone of caution. "Don't worry about it. Just a bad dream. You know how sometimes our minds create whole stories when we're stressed," she said. Jake didn't press further, but her explanation felt too neat, too confident to be true. The way she spoke was unlike their usual open conversations. "All right," he replied, though internally, his doubts grew stronger. The pieces of his suspicions were coming together, painting a picture he could no longer ignore. The strange nights, Amy's odd behavior, and the growing distance between them all added to his unease. Jake knew he couldn't stay silent anymore. Kate, still laughing cheerfully, turned to Amy. "Why don't we go to a party tonight? It'll be fun." Amy agreed immediately, without hesitation. "Yes, of course. I've been wanting to go to a party like that for ages." "Great idea." She hugged Kate and even kissed her on the cheek, a gesture that Jake found unusual. He struggled to understand why Amy seemed so excited and why her interactions with Kate felt overly affectionate. "What kind of party? Where is it?" Jake asked, trying to keep his tone calm, though a sense of dread churned inside him. Kate tilted her head and smiled playfully. "Oh, nothing special, just at some friend's place. There'll be lots of people, guys and girls, all dancing and having fun." Jake's heart began to race. He disliked parties, especially the kind where Amy might mingle with strangers. It filled him with anxiety, and the question surfaced. Was this just about having fun, or was there something more? "I don't want Amy going to this party," Jake said, his voice tinged with tension. Amy, unfazed by his objection, replied firmly, "I'm going either way. You can come with us if you'd like." Her tone was resolute yet oddly soothing, as if trying to calm him while still exerting her will. Jake didn't enjoy parties. He preferred quiet evenings at home with a book or a movie. But now, he felt compelled to go, to keep an eye on the situation. He couldn't leave Amy alone with Kate, not with how strange their dynamic had become. "Fine, I'll come with you," Jake said, though he didn't relish the idea. Amy smiled and told him he needed to buy a suit for the party, emphasizing the importance of dressing appropriately. Jake reluctantly went shopping for a formal suit. It wasn't what he envisioned for the party, but he wanted to fit in, even if just barely. He picked an expensive suit that looked stylish and elegant, though it seemed out of place for a casual gathering. Jake knew he'd look overly serious among the relaxed and carefree guests he imagined would attend. When he returned home, Amy greeted him with a smile, but upon seeing his outfit, she burst into laughter. "Really? You picked that suit for the party?" she said, still laughing as she approached him and placed a hand on his shoulder. Kate joined in, struggling to hold back her laughter. Jake felt awkward, his heart sinking. His choice of attire, which had seemed appropriate earlier, now felt glaringly wrong. He felt out of place, like he could never fit into this part of Amy's life. Their laughter stung, making him question if he truly belonged in their world. "All right," Amy said, trying to stifle her laughter. "You'll wear that suit. Let's not be late." Jake felt even worse but shrugged it off and went to change. The suit was immaculate, but it only amplified his sense of being out of sync with the carefree atmosphere he anticipated at the party. After dressing, he walked into another room and saw Amy and Kate getting ready. They stood in front of a mirror, dressed in bold, revealing outfits with deep necklines and short hemlines. Their appearance was striking, almost provocative, more than what Jake expected for a casual party. Their confident demeanor contrasted sharply with his reserved and formal look. "Why are you dressing up like that?" Jake asked, trying to sound composed, though a hint of worry crept into his voice. Amy noticed his expression and smiled faintly. "It's a party, Jake. Don't you want us to look good?" Her voice was calm, but there was a subtle detachment in her tone, one that made Jake even more suspicious. He nodded, suppressing his unease, but the feeling that something deeper was happening lingered. Tonight, he would go to the party, not to enjoy himself, but to find out the truth behind the growing distance between him and Amy. "You never dressed like that for me," Jake said, barely realizing the words had slipped out of his mouth. It hurt to say it, but he couldn't hold back. Amy looked at him, slightly surprised, and then softly replied, "Sometimes, we all want to be different, Jake. You understand that, don't you?" Her words sounded almost cold to him. If they were genuine, why had the distance between them grown so vast? The party, which had just started, was becoming increasingly unpleasant for him. He couldn't understand what was happening between them, but he felt like he no longer belonged in the picture. Jake felt completely out of his element at the party. He wasn't there to enjoy himself, but to keep an eye on Amy, to make sure she didn't end up in an uncomfortable situation. Though he tried to remain calm, His heart pounded harder with tension. He hadn't expected the party to be so big and loud. The massive two-story house was packed with people. The music blared at full volume, and there was a sea of alcohol and chatter. Jake disliked places like this. It felt like a foreign world he could never get used to. Amy and Kate quickly disappeared into the crowd, heading into another room to dance. Jake couldn't even spot them among the throng of people. He stood there, trying to remain inconspicuous, watching everyone around him having fun while he was alone. He couldn't understand why his wife had changed so much, why she went to the party with Kate, leaving him to stand on the sidelines. He was deeply upset and didn't know what to do. No matter how hard he tried, the party atmosphere didn't captivate him. The loud conversations, the dancing, the excessive drinking. It wasn't for him. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a stranger approached him. "You look so serious," she said with a smile. "Don't you want to relax a bit?" Jake looked at her in surprise. He wasn't prepared for this. At first, he tried to stay polite, but he couldn't stop himself from responding. "Sorry, but I'm already in a relationship. My wife is here," he said as calmly as he could. The girl didn't seem to take his rejection well and feigned annoyance. She laughed, then suddenly leaned forward and spilled her drink onto his new suit. The liquid soaked into the fabric, and Jake immediately felt like his entire appearance was ruined. The random encounter turned into a complete misunderstanding. "Well, just stand here then. You look like a fearless man, but you're just a bore," she said before turning and leaving Jake in shock. His new suit was now sticky and stained. He felt anger and frustration, with no outlet for these emotions. All he had tried to do was be a good husband, and this was the reward he got. Left with no choice, he started looking for his wife. Jake tried to pull himself together and figure out what to do next. He scanned the room, hoping to find Amy, and fortunately, he spotted her with Kate. They were both dancing in the crowd, their faces glowing with joy, which only irritated Jake further. He hated the emotional distance between them, hated that she no longer chose him but preferred to be with others. All Jake wanted was simple communication with his wife. He felt like her attention had been taken away from him. But then something even stranger happened. A tall, muscular man approached them. He was a complete stranger to Jake, but Kate and Amy quickly embraced him as if they had known him for a long time. To Jake, it seemed odd. He couldn't understand why they greeted this man so easily, as though nothing was out of the ordinary. The man, Amy, and Kate began walking toward the stairs. Jake decided not to lose sight of them and followed. His heart pounded faster, and he felt the tension inside him growing. He climbed to the second floor, but it was quiet there, with no one in sight, just a few doors leading to closed rooms. Carefully, he began checking the doors, pressing his ear to them and peeking through small windows when possible. Jake tried to figure out where the three had gone, what was happening, but each room he checked was locked. Each unsuccessful attempt made his chest tighten even more, as he found nothing to clue him in. Finally, his patience snapped. He felt it wasn't healthy to keep following them like this and realized he no longer belonged here. Emotionally drained, he couldn't understand why his wife was so unavailable, why she didn't want to spend the evening with him. He felt like he didn't understand his place at this party anymore. Jake decided to leave. He didn't wait for the girls to return. Step by step, he walked out of the house, feeling lonely and deeply disappointed. Only one thought circled in his mind. What am I doing wrong? Why is this happening? Jake returned home, his heart pounding relentlessly. A seeker of answers, he felt broken and hollow. His mind was clouded by thoughts that his wife might have left with that strange man, and he didn't know how to process it. Maybe it was just his fear, his suspicions, but he couldn't let go of what had happened that night. Sitting in silence, he could only hear the dull sound of his deep breaths, feeling the weight in his soul growing heavier. This can't be happening, he thought, burying his face in his hands. Amy couldn't betray me. But who was that man? And why has she been acting like this all night? Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by a ringing phone. An unknown number. Jake hesitated before answering. He was scared, but he picked up the call. "Jake, it's me, Amy," said the voice on the other end, tense and filled with irritation. "Where are you? Why did you leave?" We're in trouble here. How could you just abandon Kate and me? You didn't even ask what happened." Jake held his breath for a moment, anxiety surging through him again. "Why are you calling from an unknown number? Aren't you still at the party?" he asked, trying to stay calm, though his emotions were tearing him apart. "I borrowed Kate's phone," Amy replied, her voice growing more strained. "Something bad happened. A woman hit Kate. I don't even know what to do. You need to come back." Jake's heart pounded faster. His nerves felt stretched to their limit. What had happened at the party? Who would hit Kate? And why did his wife sound so agitated? Most of all, he feared for Amy and Kate's safety and knew he couldn't wait. He hurriedly got into his car and drove back to the house where it had all happened. His thoughts spiraled, each one sharp as a knife. He didn't know what he would do when he got there, but one thing was certain. He couldn't let this go. When Jake arrived, he immediately saw them. Amy and Kate stood on the steps, their faces pale and unsettled. Their dresses were wrinkled, and their expressions showed a mixture of confusion and anxiety. It looked as though they'd just weathered a storm. But what kind of storm? "What happened?" Jake asked, his voice thick with worry as he approached them. He looked at Kate, who appeared as though she'd been through a fight. "Kate, who hit you?" Kate pressed her lips together and closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering her strength to speak. "Some woman. She thought I was your wife. She just walked up and hit me. I don't know why. She must have been drunk, but it was terrifying." Jake felt even more confused. Why would someone think Kate was his wife? Was it a random misunderstanding? Or was there something he was missing? His suspicions returned, but he couldn't dwell on them now. He felt a deep guilt toward Kate, who had suffered because of his actions. "I'm so sorry, Kate," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "This is all my fault. I don't know why this happened." Amy, standing beside Kate, couldn't hold back her anger. She turned to Jake and snapped, "You ruin everything, Jake. Why couldn't you just leave things as they were? You came here in that ridiculous suit, all dirty. You've ruined everything. You didn't even ask how we were. You're always suspicious, always trying to control everything. When will it stop?" Jake felt his chest tighten at her words. It wasn't fair. He had done everything to be a good husband, and now he was being blamed for caring too much. "I just wanted to know you were okay," he replied, trying to keep his emotions in check. "I care about you, Amy." "I was worried." But Amy was unrelenting. She grabbed Kate by the hand and led her into the house without another word. Jake was left alone, standing in the empty hallway. He couldn't understand what had just happened. Only hours ago, he'd felt certain about everything, but now his mind was clouded. He couldn't shake the image of Kate with her injured cheek or the tall, muscular man who had disappeared so quickly. His suspicions about infidelity lingered, weighing heavily on him. Yet, he was left alone, doubting whether he was truly the man Amy accused him of being. What if she had her own secrets? What if what he had seen was only part of a much bigger game? The next morning, Jake woke up early, feeling drained. Though the night had passed, the internal discomfort hadn't left him. He got up, went to the kitchen, and found Amy and Kate already there. Amy looked tense, while Kate seemed tired but not scared. Jake took a few steps toward the table, gathering all his resolve, and asked, "Kate, when are you planning to go home?" Amy immediately shot him a sharp look over her coffee cup, her expression full of disapproval. "Why should Kate leave?" she asked, her voice suddenly harsh. "She got hurt because of you. You didn't even think about that when you left us behind. She'll stay here as long as she wants." Jake felt the last shred of confidence leave him. She was right. Kate had indeed suffered because of his doubts and anger. All his accusations and nerves, it had been unfair. A bitter feeling welled up in his chest, as if he had done something terribly wrong. "I'm sorry," he whispered, lowering his gaze. "I was just worried about you, about Kate. I shouldn't have acted that way." Kate smiled softly, though it was a smile more of understanding than joy. She nodded quietly, and Jake felt that, even though her words weren't as harsh as Amy's, they carried a deep meaning. Something was off. Everything had become strange. Jake felt that something was happening between his wife and Kate. He remembered how they had left with that unfamiliar man at the party. The tall, muscular man. His suspicions wouldn't let him rest, but he stayed silent. He didn't want to appear overly suspicious or jealous, but the thoughts didn't leave him. Jake decided he needed answers. He began observing Amy and Kate closely, trying to figure out what was happening between them. Days went by. At first, everything seemed normal, but the more time Jake spent near them, the more he felt excluded. Amy grew more distant, and her behavior made Jake increasingly uneasy. She was no longer the open and loving woman she used to be. They stopped spending time together. Now, she spent almost all her time with Kate. She even left her job to be with her friend. It was more than strange. One day, coming home from work, Jake noticed the house was eerily quiet again. He walked into the kitchen and saw Amy and Kate sitting together, laughing and drinking wine. It wasn't the first time lately that they'd been together, and Jake felt like an outsider. His chest tightened, and it became hard to breathe. "Emma," Jake began, trying to keep his emotions in check. "You've even quit your job now. What's going on? You're always with Kate. When will it just be the two of us? What am I doing wrong?" Emma looked at him with a sly smile that made Jake uneasy. "Don't worry, everything will be fine," she said soothingly, but her words felt more like she was brushing him off. "Kate and I are planning to go out of town for a little while. We'll stay at a hotel, relax a bit, and then I'll come back home. Kate will head back to her place, and we'll return to normal life." Jake felt uncertainty bubbling up in his chest again. He wanted to believe Emma's words, but something about the situation didn't sit right with him. Why were they going to a hotel? Why did it all feel so secretive? And what about me? His voice grew quieter. "I don't want to be alone. You said we'd be together. Will we ever just be the two of us again?" Emma nodded again, her expression shifting slightly, but she didn't stop. She had clearly made up her mind. "Everything will be fine, Jake," she said, trying to sound convincing. "You're just overthinking, and I don't want you to worry. Kate and I need a little break, and then everything will go back to normal." Jake watched as she picked up her cup and headed to the other room. Something felt off. Her words didn't match her actions, and the secrecy surrounding everything made it worse. What role did Kate really play in their lives? His heart raced, and his thoughts spiraled. He couldn't leave things to chance any longer. He had to know the truth. That evening, when Emma and Kate left for their trip, Jake decided he couldn't just sit at home. He followed them. Was it paranoia? Or intuition telling him that he was on the verge of uncovering something much bigger than he could imagine? Driving carefully to avoid detection, Jake followed their car as inconspicuously as possible. Emma and Kate didn't notice him trailing them. He noticed that their car veered off in a direction that didn't match where they said they were going. Eventually, Emma and Kate's car pulled over in front of a large house. Two men, well-dressed, clean-cut, and muscular, emerged from the house and got into the car with Emma and Kate. Jake's nerves spiked. Who were these men? Why hadn't Emma mentioned them? Then, he remembered Emma's earlier joke about inviting some guys on their trip to the hotel. Jake had dismissed it as playful banter, but now it seemed like reality. Jake decided not to jump to conclusions and chose instead to continue following them. He drove behind them all the way to the hotel. When they arrived, Jake realized this wasn't just any hotel. It was a secluded luxury retreat with a pool, a jacuzzi, and lavish rooms. It was far removed from the modest places Emma and he used to stay. And now she was here, with Kate and two strange men. Jake checked into a room nearby to keep a closer eye on them. At first, he maintained a safe distance, not wanting to arouse suspicion. But what he saw next shattered everything. Emma, Kate, and the two men went to the jacuzzi. From his hidden vantage point, Jake watched in disbelief. Emma kissed one of the men passionately, while Kate did the same with the other. Their embraces were fiery, their touches intimate. It wasn't just physical infidelity. It was a betrayal of trust, of everything Jake had believed about his wife and their relationship. Jake's stomach churned with pain. His heart ached with bitterness. He couldn't reconcile what he was seeing with the woman he thought he knew. The people he loved most had become strangers, and their actions were an affront to everything he had built his life around. Unable to bear it, Jake left his hiding spot and rushed back to his room. His breath was ragged, and his chest felt tight. He couldn't stay in this place, near them, even if they didn't know he was there. He didn't want them to see him, to realize he had been watching. Collapsing onto the bed in his room, Jake buried his face in his hands. His heart pounded wildly, and he couldn't escape the overwhelming sense of loss. The ground seemed to crumble beneath him. Everything he thought he knew about Emma, about their life together, was now in question. Was their love ever real? Or had it all been a lie he told himself for years? Jake needed time to calm down and process everything, but deep down, he already knew. This wasn't just infidelity. This was something deeper. Emma, Kate, and those men. Their connection seemed far more complex than mere entertainment or a mistake. It was part of something Jake couldn't yet comprehend. Sitting alone, Jake reflected on everything he knew about his wife. She had always been enigmatic. He'd noticed subtle changes in her over time. Variations in her tone, fleeting glances, increasing emotional distance. But he had ignored these signs, dismissing them as overthinking. Now he realized they had been real all along. What was next? Did he have the right to seek revenge? Did he even have the right to intervene in their lives? He wasn't sure. He was torn between walking away and trying to salvage some fragment of his old life. Jake took a deep breath and felt his heart steady slightly. He knew this situation couldn't end without closure. He needed answers, to confront the truth head-on and decide his next steps. He couldn't simply walk away, close his eyes, and forget what he'd witnessed. He needed clarity. Perhaps the hardest choice of his life awaited him. Jake decided it was time to confront Emma. Though heartbroken, even crying at moments, he resolved to face her directly and catch her in the act. The next day, Jake saw Emma and Kate return to their hotel room after a spa session. Shortly afterward, the two men joined them. Jake wrestled with his emotions, unsure whether he should see things through. Gathering his courage, he walked to their door, intending to listen in. At first, there was silence. But then, muffled voices escalated into the same loud cries he had once heard at home. Anger surged through Jake as he pounded on the door, his frustration boiling over. After repeated banging, one of the men opened the door and looked at Jake with an unimpressed expression. "What do you want? Who are you?" the man asked curtly. Jake, trembling but resolute, replied, "I'm the husband of the woman who just entered this room with you." The man, slightly startled, stepped aside and let Jake in, muttering something before leaving quickly. Jake stepped into the room and froze. Time seemed to stand still as he took in the scene before him. Emma was intimately involved with one of the men, while Kate lounged nearby, oddly indifferent. The man quickly grabbed his clothes and dashed out of the room, leaving Jake standing there, overwhelmed. Jake's world crumbled before his eyes. Emma, his wife, his life partner, had betrayed him so thoroughly that he couldn't process it. And Kate, who had been a close friend, was complicit in the betrayal. Emma burst into tears, desperately trying to justify her actions. Her words came out hollow, as though she were talking about a distant event rather than the raw betrayal unfolding in front of Jake. "This was all Kate's idea," she stammered repeatedly, trying to deflect responsibility, but it didn't matter anymore. To Jake, her words were meaningless, just another attempt to conceal the truth he had already uncovered. "You betrayed me with men, with Kate, with your best friend." Jake's voice cracked as he spoke, his words falling like heavy stones. He couldn't believe this was his reality. The woman he had loved and trusted, the person he had built his life around, turned out to be someone entirely different. Jake felt betrayed not just as a husband but also as a friend, as the trust he had placed in both Emma and Kate was shattered. He didn't know how to act. He stood there, staring at Emma, who now seemed distant and unfamiliar. Breathing became difficult as every inhale brought a fresh wave of pain and disappointment. "But why?" Jake asked again, his voice strained. "Why couldn't you just talk to me? Why couldn't we work this out together? Why did you betray me?" His voice wavered between anger and heartbreak. Emma sobbed, struggling to find words. She looked as though she couldn't understand how things had come to this. I don't know, Jake. It just happened. We couldn't talk anymore. It was all Kate. She pushed me into this." Emma looked like a child, trying to justify her actions. But Jake was done listening to her explanations. He turned to Kate, who sat silently on the bed, avoiding his gaze. You too? You were my friend, Kate? His words rang like a verdict. Kate shrugged, her face emotionless. She seemed detached, as though the situation didn't concern her. Jake couldn't fathom how someone he had trusted so deeply could act so coldly. I know it's wrong, Kate murmured, but I couldn't take it anymore. I can't explain it. This has been going on for so long, and I didn't want you to find out, Jake. I didn't want to hurt you. Jake couldn't listen any longer. His heart ached from the betrayal, and he felt like he was losing control over his emotions. He glanced at Emma, who was still crying. Her words were a blur, overshadowed by the images of her kissing another man, embracing him, and Kate, sitting there as if none of this mattered. It was too much. Jake's anger bubbled to the surface. He couldn't let this go. He needed to do something to restore his dignity, to make sure this betrayal didn't go unanswered. A plan began to form in his mind. He wanted revenge. That was his first instinct, and he couldn't suppress it anymore. He didn't know what his next steps would look like, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going to let this go unpunished. Jake took a moment, gripping the arm of the couch as though it was the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. Emma's words echoed in his head like a thunderclap, each one chiseling away at the remnants of his trust. You want Kate to move in with us? His voice was trembling, disbelief mingling with anger. After everything? After what you did? How can you even ask me this? Emma tightened her grip on his hand, her teary eyes pleading. Jake, I know how this sounds, but you need to understand. I need her. This wasn't just about the physical connection. It's about who I've become, who I'm trying to understand myself to be. Kate has been there for me in ways I can't explain. Jake yanked his hand away, standing up abruptly. He paced the room, running his hands through his hair, as if trying to comb out the chaos in his mind. And what about me, Emma? Have you thought about what I need? About what this has done to me? You didn't just betray me. You destroyed the foundation of everything we built together. And now you're asking me to accept her into our home? Into our lives? Emma stood as well, her composure cracking further. I don't want to lose you, Jake. I love you. I truly do. But I also can't deny what I feel for Kate. It's not as simple as choosing one or the other. This is who I am now. I want us to try and make this work together. Jake let out a hollow laugh, filled with bitterness and disbelief. Make it work? You want me to live under the same roof as the person who helped you destroy our marriage? How am I supposed to look at either of you and feel anything but betrayal? Emma stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. Because I believe we can rebuild this, Jake. I believe there's still love between us, and that love can help us navigate this new dynamic. I need you to try, just as I'm willing to try. Jake shook his head, his heart pounding in his chest. Emma, this isn't just about trying. This is about respect, about trust. You shattered both. And now you're asking me to rebuild our life around something I don't even recognize? Tears streamed down Emma's face as she reached for him again. Please, Jake. I know I've hurt you, and I know this isn't fair to ask, but I can't do this without you. You're my anchor, my home. Let's figure this out together. Jake froze, staring at her as a storm of emotions churned inside him. Pain, betrayal, love, and anger all fought for dominance. He didn't know if he had the strength to navigate the wreckage of their marriage, let alone accommodate the presence of the woman who had helped dismantle it. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter now but no less firm. Emma, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can be the person you need me to be in this situation. You've asked me for understanding, but you haven't given me the chance to heal, to even process what you've done. And now you're asking for more than I think I have left to give. Emma looked crushed, but she nodded slowly. I understand, Jake. I do. But please, just don't walk away. Let's figure this out, even if it takes time. Jake stared at her, the woman he had loved and trusted, now a stranger standing before him with tears in her eyes and a request he could barely fathom. He didn't answer her. Instead, he turned and walked to the door, pausing as he gripped the handle. I need time, Emma. Time to think. Time to figure out if I can even find a way forward. Don't call me. Don't come looking for me. I'll reach out when I'm ready. With that, he opened the door and stepped outside, leaving Emma standing alone in the house that now felt like a monument to everything he had lost. As he walked away, the weight of her request pressed down on him, and he wondered if there was any part of their life that could ever be rebuilt. Jake stood at the crossroads of his life, feeling the weight of Emma's words pressing down on him like a crushing burden. Yes, Jake, I want us to live together. I want us to be a family. Don't you see? There's something bigger here than just betrayal. And I know it sounds strange, but I want Kate to be with us. I want to be with you, but I also want to be with her, Emma said, her voice a mixture of pleading and conviction. Jake felt his heart shatter into pieces. What remained of their marriage? What other secrets had she kept from him? Have you lost your mind? How can I accept this? Jake's voice was raw, almost a cry. This is impossible. You can't ask this of me. You have no right. You betrayed me, and now you want me to accept that you want to live with Kate. Emma lowered her head, and Jake could feel his anger and disappointment reaching their peak. All those years, everything he had done for her and their marriage, now seemed utterly meaningless. I'm so sorry, Jake. I know this is hard, but I can't change my feelings, she said, standing before him like a child asking for forgiveness for something out of their control. But for Jake, the answer was clear. He couldn't live in this reality. His soul was broken, but he understood he needed to move forward. And though it pained him deeply, he knew he had to leave this betrayal behind and find himself again. Jake packed his belongings into a small bag. The house that once brimmed with love and harmony now felt like a cold, chaotic void. Emma and Kate sat together in the kitchen, discussing the future with calm, almost cheerful voices. For them, this was a new beginning. For Jake, it was the end. I'll be staying at my mom's for a few weeks, Jake said, standing by the door. His voice was steady, but it carried an undercurrent of immense pain. Emma approached him, placing her hand gently on his arm. Jake, I understand how hard this is, but please, take the time to think. We want to make this work. We want to stay a family, she said softly. Jake looked at her. Once, his gaze had been filled with love. Now, it reflected only exhaustion and doubt. He nodded, but he didn't speak. Turning away, he walked out the door, leaving behind the house and all the dreams that had been dashed. What would you do in Jake's place? Would you be able to forgive betrayal and accept such a situation? Share your thoughts in the comments.